English translation. 669th Contact. Part 1 Sunday, the 1st of January 2017, 13:29 hours.
Hello, you are coming earlier than you said you would, but welcome and greet you, dear friend. Why you did not call me? Because I was in the kitchen talking to some of the group members. But because I still have a problem with my computer and the accounting files, Piero will come to fix it. It will not take long, but then you will have to go behind the bookshelves, or you will have to go through the gate back into your room for a few minutes.
Greetings also, Edward, my dear friend. It has fortunately turned out that I could come here earlier than planned. Thank you for your welcome. It will be enough if I go behind the bookcases and wait when Piero comes. And if it really does not take long, it will not be a problem either.
Good, then it is settled.
Now, if you want, you can ask your questions right away, which you could not ask on my last visit because I had to leave. If it is possible for me, then I would like to answer them. I did not call you, however, because I observed that you were busy talking. But before that, I think you will want to know the latest state of the world's population, which we determined last night at exactly midnight.
Of course, because this is important. But it also applies to the exact number of fictitious refugees who have entered or crept into Europe through the refugee welcome culture of the mentally disturbed German Chancellor Angela Merkel.
I can also tell you these dates, because we have also finished our registration for the year 2016 at midnight. Then listen. The overpopulation of the earthly humanity has increased by about 104,995,000 persons to the exact number of 8,739,001,024 human beings. Unfortunately, it is to be said that the Earth's population is wrongly calculated by a mathematical formula and regularly compared with false estimates by various authorities. It is wrongly claimed that the world population is increasing by about 2.5 human beings per second, which means that 2.5 more human beings are born than die. This, or rather the calculation of the German Foundation for World Population, is extremely incorrect, because it lists far fewer births than actually take place, which means that up to the present time there are about 1,350,000,000 more Earth humans living on. The planet then is indicated by the mathematical formula system and the world population clock. This in turn is used to make the claim that there are fewer births every year. But this is not true, because the opposite is true.
Powerful. Thanks for the statement. And that the truth is, of course, denied and completely false statements are made. That is typical for the Earthlings responsible in this respect, but which also include those lying elements who lie that everything on Earth is not getting worse but better in every respect. And this is only because the media has recently started to report more news of good and progressive things, such as that illiteracy is decreasing in some places and that more Earthlings would have better living conditions, etc. But what is really happening and existing in the background in an increasing number of evil, bad, evil, and inhumane things is tried to hide and conceal with good and positive things in news. So, in this way it is tried to sell the human beings of Earth even more as stupid and dumb, and to deceive them even more than it has been done since the media is only looking for sensations, distorting and falsifying the truth of reality and fooling the readers and listeners with lies and deception.
Which unfortunately cannot be denied and also cannot be changed, because the media earn their money with it.
Yes, and they are also politically and religiously inspired and committed, so that they orientate themselves against all reason and truth according to it, according to every miserable political leadership and their delusional belief in God. But something else. Do you know how many small and big criminals of all kinds have crept in all over Europe, including Switzerland, as well as criminals against life and limb like murderers, and how many members of the Islamic State are waiting to carry out assassinations and who are also infiltrating and recruiting new willing people for the IS, as well as rapists of women and girls and social welfare fraudsters and the like? Do you have any percentage figures on how many crimes in total, And how many violent crimes in Europe and Germany have been committed by asylum seekers? Sham asylum seekers, refugees, economic refugees, and infiltrated terrorists, etc. in 2016 as a result of Merkel's welcome culture.
With regard to the criminals and violent criminals who have infiltrated all European states, our registrations for the whole of 2016 show a total of 131,476 persons, but they are in fact spread over all European states, which also includes Switzerland. This figure mainly refers to legal and illegal criminal immigrants from various African, Arab, and Asian countries, as well as from South and East European countries. We registered 102,108 in Germany alone and 916 in Switzerland. The remaining number is distributed among all states of the EU dictatorship. Other bogus refugees, such as economic refugees and those who only want to apply for financial help, are not included in our registrations, because if they are neither criminal nor violent criminals, they are of no relevance to our investigations in this respect. And as for your question concerning percentage calculations, such calculations are extremely wavering because they have to be specified according to criminality or crime, which is not relevant for us. I also cannot give you any information in this respect. Only a part of the majority of all refugees corresponds to effective refugees who seek protection for their lives in European countries and flee from acts of war in their home countries.
Nonetheless, the refugee culture created by the mad German chancellor has been the real cornerstone of the refugee flows into Europe. It is true that, according to your information, more than 70 million human beings are already on the move as refugees worldwide, which is why only a small percentage of the 1.6 million or so who came to Europe in 2016 or crept in illegally are against it. But if we consider that in the next 2 centuries, as the prophecies explain, not only wars and terrorism, but also climate and environmental destruction, and the resulting shortage of food and water will create an overpopulation of 250–350 million human beings as refugees, then the Earth, its human overpopulation as well as nature and its flora and fauna, will face very bad times. But what I want to say about the criminals and violent criminals, etc., who have crept into Europe legally or illegally, they are still being lifted up into the sky by false humanists, especially in Switzerland and Germany, and everything is being done to protect them from the law for their crimes and offenses. This will be particularly true now that everywhere, especially in Switzerland and Germany, as elsewhere in Europe, over the Christmas and New Year holidays, the police and other officials and security forces carried out strict controls, made arrests, and protected and safeguarded the populations from murderous terrorists and rapists. Incorrigible, morbidly effeminate, weak intellectual and bean-throwing false humanists, who come specifically from left-wing political camps, or who otherwise could not exist in their effeminacy and incapacity to live without the protection of the police. Officials and other security forces are in the foreground in order to criticize the protection officers and the protective measures in the crackdown. And when these idiotic and pathological fools and intellectuals suffer harm even by criminals or violent criminals, they are the very first to cry wrath and murder after the security forces, officials, and police have failed to provide security. Wait, you also heard it. It will be Piero who rang the bell because he has to explain something about the bookkeeping to me in the computer.
Then I go behind the bookshelves.
Good. Then I open the door and let Piero in. Puta, you can come out now.
It was really fast and only took 2 minutes.
Yeah, but now I've lost the thread of what I wanted to say to everything I was talking about.
What you said before corresponds to an undeniable fact. And as far as the other thing you mentioned is concerned, it is unfortunately no longer avoidable. Because on the one hand, the mass of Earth humans has already become so rampant that many disasters are already so pre-programmed that they can no longer be prevented. On the other hand, the natural processes of flourishing and life in the whole of nature have already been destroyed to such an extent that the whole thing cannot regenerate itself again. This is because, as a result of the degenerated machinations of overpopulation, the triggered destructive climatic, planetary, natural, fauna, and flora processes are being continued irresponsibly. And this continuation of the whole thing, the unstoppable further increase of overpopulation, the destructive machinations on the whole planet Earth, its atmosphere and air, its climate and waters, the fields, gardens, floodplains, forests, and meadows, and thus on the whole of nature and its fauna and flora, make it impossible to regenerate even in the smallest form. And since the long-since Earth human beings' delusional creation of descendants has been bringing about a decrease in the intellect, reason, and intelligence of Earth humans for several decades now, which is becoming more and more obvious, ascertainable and recognizable, it is not to be expected that in valuable time all destruction and thus also the rampant overpopulation will be stopped and a worldwide birth control will be introduced and decisively enforced.
Tell me about it, dear friend, because the majority of the hidden Earthlings do not want to see the whole thing, and therefore also go through life with blinders on.
What you say I do not understand. What does in disguise mean, and what are blinders?
This is another name for being blind or seeing nothing. Actually, the term comes from the language of hunters, and means that a hawk, for example, eagle, falcon, or sparrowhawk, has a leather cap put over his head so that he cannot see anything and keeps quiet. Symbolically transferred to the human beings, it means that they walk blindly or blindly through the world. The speech is also used in a similar way, walking through the world with blinkers on, whereby one only sees straight ahead, but not left and right. Blinders are palm-sized rectangular, square, oval, or round flaps made of fabric or leather, which are also known as blinders, blinkers, eye patches, or leather. These are usually shields made of leather, which are attached to the bridle of horses and donkeys next to the eyes of the animal. Usually these flaps are attached to the bridle of horses at eye level on both sides, thus preventing the animal from seeing to the side and back, but they are also intended to prevent the animal from being frightened. Blinkers are also available for the human beings, which are attached to glasses, for example. In human beings, the expression blinkers means that the human beings have a limited angle of vision, or that everything is one-sided and narrow-minded. This saying is only common in the German and Swiss German language since the beginning of the 19th century. The term is also often used for the human beings who stubbornly look or think in only one direction in order not to perceive problems. However, for the human beings, wearing blinkers also means that they do not take advantage of certain opportunities and thus suffer disadvantages or damage. It is also a fact that the human beings who have blinkers and therefore only look straight ahead, but not left, not right, and not backwards, are usually stressed out by everyday life or have immense existential fears. However, they feel overwhelmed by many situations and would therefore prefer to be left alone.
Thanks for your explanation. The whole thing was not known to me.
It also does not refer to the usual Swiss German and German language usage, but to special idioms that are not learned during the actual language learning process, but belong more to general education.
I see, but once again I would like to thank you.
That's all right, you are welcome.
Then I would now like to comply with your request, which you made during one of my last visits, regarding the first one-way telepathic conversation my father had with you. For this purpose, it will be necessary for me to speak the whole thing to you, after which you can then simply insert everything my father said and also record it in his annals at this point of conversation, when you recall our conversation today. So my father's notes say the following.
First telepathic contact conversation from Thursday, the 3rd of February, 1944. Statements of Svarth according to his annals transmitted by Tar.
These are my first thought-transmitting words of instruction today, which I am transmitting to you, which are also being recorded, and which, as I know from looking into the future, you will desire in the distant future to make known to the peoples of the earth. But what I am teaching you today in a thought-transmitting way is the announcement of all those things, events and values which I will also teach you into the future, often repeatedly, with regard to your behavior and also with regard to many future events on Earth. This means that they will not be prophecies, because all that I will explain to you several times in the coming years in this thought-transmitting way, and also personally face-to-face, are predictions and therefore events that will occur in the future, and which I have also seen in the future. I am still teaching you in this respect for the next few years, as I will also teach you in writing and in the German language, so that you will have mastered both in a decisively good way at the appropriate time. And when you write or speak, you must learn to do so in an absolutely neutral way, without integrating your own thoughts and the resulting feelings into decisions and advice, because only then will you be able to master logic, to see and judge everything correctly without condemnation or even anticipation. So whether you have to make decisions or give advice, on the one hand, there is always the need for your absolute neutrality. But on the other hand, there is also the need for you always to analyze and judge the exact facts, but not simply their characteristics, because the actual fact embodies the true importance, which must be analyzed and worked through in an analytical and neutral way, and formed into a correct and valuable decision or advice. So it is also necessary that you always speak consciously and in detail when you have something to explain, because it is always necessary in every respect that your explanations, statements are so unambiguous that they are understood beyond doubt by the reader or listener. If, however, your explanations and words are not sufficient, you must be patient and explain everything again and perhaps again in other words, and again until understanding is sufficient. This is what you have to do in every respect, both in terms of everything related to your mission and in a purely private way. This will also be necessary when you take my predictions, which will also include a few prophecies from your memory, and process them into articles and letters at your own discretion, shaping and spreading them in your personal manner, which will not be until 1949. You will then be a herald, the herald of the modern age, to whom you will ever at the correct time write down my predictions in your own characteristic manner and pass them on to public authorities who will act on Earth as information brokers for the people, and who, as public means of communication, will make available to Earth humans all that is necessary for knowledge. These single information powers are the worldwide print information mediators, such as book and newspaper producers, but also leaflet and poster producers, etc. Teleprinters, which are also in the process of being developed and which will connect the world in written form in 25 years' time, should also be used. Films, radio and radio broadcasting, as well as public television, which will be found in all modern homes, should also be used to spread the mission in a neutral way, and thus without missionary character. What is very topical, however, is that in the future a form of communication and publication will be of great importance, which is known worldwide as the Internet, and which will be used by billions of people all over the world for a wide range of topics. So in the coming period, the New World communication technology of this electronic information network will be used in particular to spread the mission, because this global network, for which the foundations will be laid in the coming 1960s, will enter its commercial phase in the first 1990s, making this internet the world's most important communication platform. You shall use all these forms of publication little by little during the time of your life and make known the signs of the coming times of Earth humans. In particular, you yourself will also spread worldwide in writing and language through your own various publication organs what the future will bring, because mankind will degenerate more and more in all imaginable relations with the earthly world. We will be helpful to you with our knowledge, but how you also have to contribute a lot in your life to create the necessary means of every kind, which will be necessary to fulfill your difficult mission. Your whole existence and your way of life will never be easy, because you will live an adventurous and very difficult life, which will make you stronger and enable you to fulfill your difficult mission. You will fight criminality in foreign countries, protect human lives, and provide life support, which will be rewarded, and you will be able to build up everything necessary for your mission. You will also do varied and hard work and necessarily learn all sorts of trades, which you will later use to build a place that will serve to fulfill your mission and become known all over the world. It will be a place close to the birthplace of your mother, which you already know and which you will make the center of your fast-working global mission with the help of your faithful. But you will meet many enemies who will be full of envy and know-it-all, hatred and evil, who will threaten and slander you. Even from your own family you are going to found in Greece, as well as from your followers, who often have been loyal for many years. And there will also be many attacks on your life, but you will escape them because a sensory factor within you warns you of them, and you will act accordingly. But you will still fulfill your mission against all the adversities that will come to you and affect you, although you will be scolded as a prophet and truth scout, as a deceiver and charlatan. But you will not be alone, for you will have a loyal following at your side, which will be very helpful to you, but among them will also be traitors who will break their loyalty to you and your mission after a certain time and shamefully commit treason, often only after many years of working together. And it will also be this in your family through wife and child, which will affect you just as deeply in your thoughts and feelings and put a strain on your psyche, but which you will learn to understand and to cope with through your hard and difficult life teaching. Through the power and the will of your consciousness, you will become stronger despite all malicious resistances by a large number of antagonists. Note Billy = antipodes or antagonists. These are the first details and realities which I am going to bring to your attention today, and which I will also add to your consciousness at a later time by means of apparatus. However, you should think about them from today on and draw your own conclusions from them, because this will be important for your experience and the experience of your personal learning.
Thanks. That was a lot at one time, but I had tried very hard to grasp the whole thing and put it in my memory, so the whole teaching became part of my whole life behavior. But thanks a lot that you also livened up my memories with it. And if I may ask you once again that you can also organize my first letter, which I wrote in 1949 and sent to many media in Switzerland, Austria, and Germany. I am sure that would also be of great value.
For my next visit, I will pick out the letter and bring it with me. But I have here a prediction of my father, which he told you during a conversation on Saturday, the 14th of June, 1947.
Prediction by Svarth from the Contact Conversation on Saturday, the 14th of June, 1947.
The Earth humanity will weep in future times because, through their own fault, there will be sad things, events, wars, terrorism, and destruction in future times. A religious sectarian delusion of faith, which is becoming more and more prevalent, will in future encourage apostasy or renunciation of the true knowledge of reality and the resulting truth, which will also involve disregarding the natural creational laws, making this renunciation the worst of all evils in future times. It will be true that many believers in religion and sects will officially renounce their religion or sect, but they will still remain addicted to its dogmas and forms of belief and will preserve them, which is why they will continue to disregard and disobey the natural creational laws, thus preferring darkness to light and not turning to the real and its truth. From this will come the finding that death is better than life, which is why many Earth humans will no longer look to the safety of life, but will prefer to die, whether by direct suicide or by indirect suicide in connection with acts of war or terrorism. The human beings who devote themselves to reality and to the truth arising from it, and thus also to the natural creational laws, and who shape and lead their lives in this way, will be considered mad and ungood, while, as has been the case since ancient times, the believers in God will be considered good and wise. And this will be as it has always been, because the religious and sectarian human beings will become mad in their faith and will do many evil injustices and acts of war and terror, for which they will be considered bold and, in their farewell to life, the best and the good, while they will insult and despise those who strive for peace and freedom, and thus also for reality and truth, and for the natural creational laws. This is what they will do in future times, because their thoughts and feelings, as well as their psyche, will be corrupted, because they will be unpeaceful, unfree, and dissatisfied with everything that concerns them, just contrary to those who think of reality and truth. The believers who think they are better than those who sincerely strive for truth, love, peace, and freedom will hope to attain immortality through their faith in their false God. But they will be disappointed because they will not find their way out of their life's doubts, dissatisfaction, and fear. In this way, they will cover the righteous who strive for reality and truth, and live in this way with malice, mockery, sarcasm, ridicule, and cynicism. All this is the truth that will come to pass in the future in an ever more blatant way, as it has also happened since ancient times, whereby the God-believers will try to humiliate with stupid laughter and mockery all those who, as those who know, strive for reality and the given truth, and will devalue their knowledge as nonsense. It will even be that there will be danger of death for those who cling to the cultivation of intelligence, the knowledge of truth, and unswervingly to reality. It will also be that many new legal systems and new laws will be enacted, but these will not point to the truth doctrine in a word, but will, on the contrary, protect false religious beliefs and the believers in religion and sex, because this is supposedly worthy of heaven and will prevent a regrettable separation between God and the human beings. This will cause wretched human beings to mingle among human beings who, through lies and slander, will brand those who know the truth as corrupt. Thus, believers of religions and sects will lay hands on those who know the truth, or will try to do so, and thus many believers in their delusion will lead themselves to crime, war and terror, as well as to robbery, lies, slander, and betrayal, as well as to all that will seriously damage the nature of their own consciousness and psyche. So it will be the believers in their unnatural faith, as it has been since time immemorial, who in their delusion do all evil and promote war and terrorism, demand punishments unworthy of life for others, and themselves take up arms in order to use them irresponsibly against fellow human beings and kill them. And through politics, religions, and sectarianism, terrorist organizations will emerge through which mass and bestial, innocent human beings will be murdered. Everything will come apart at the seams, and there will be no more order, which can hardly be maintained on a small scale, but cannot be completely restored. The earth itself will also become unbalanced and will no longer have a regular seasonal rhythm, because the mass of human overpopulation will destroy, annihilate, and exterminate an enormous amount of nature and its plants and animals in order to satisfy their desires and needs. And this will happen in the near and far future, just as the oceans will also become fished out and partly unshippable. The regular course of the stars will also be disturbed, while the majority of Earth humans in their religious delusion will not respect the voices of those who know the real truth of reality and fight for it in a teaching way. Although attempts will be made to condemn their voices to silence, which those who believe in God will not succeed for a while. But the seed of truth will often, and for a very long time, fade away, unheard, before the seed rises and bears fruit. And consequently, until then, much of what is good will still be spoiled, and much of the earth will cease to be fertile, just as the air will also become heavy to breathe in its gloomy slackness. There will be an absence of any order, as well as a confusion of all rules and values. And when all this will have come to pass, then the remnant that remains of Earth humans will have to restore the sublime totality of the world in a very laborious manner over many centuries and millennia, clearing everything up in peace, freedom, and goodness, to put an end to all the transgressions that have taken place and to the general corruption of Earth humans. But it will be asked whether Earth humans will be decimated by epidemics, or whether they will consume the world with fire or destroy it completely with wars and terrorism, or whether they will preserve the Earth and return it to its original beauty. According to these very serious predictions, the fulfillment of which is unavoidable, the coming times will bring great upheavals well into the third millennium. First of all, unprecedented prosperity for all sections of the population, as well as immense wealth for many who will become multimillionaires and billionaires. This will make the human being selfish and greedy as never before, which will also increase crime and violent crimes to a high degree, which will also maliciously corrupt and abuse all the rules of good, as well as cause countless people to give up all their good intentions, which will lead to degenerating anarchist machinations, with young people and medieval people being particularly affected. All that is good and progressive, as well as all that is worth living, will be forgotten by many human beings and trampled into the dirt, which will also result in a decline from all morality and thus corruption of morals, up to the state-permitted open and taxable whoring as has never been seen before. And furthermore, bloody and radical extremist groups in the Nazi manner will emerge from the last World War in Europe, Russia, the USA, and other countries. But murderous terrorist organizations will also emerge, especially in Arab and Near Eastern and directly Asian countries, where America's intelligence and warlike machinations will wreak havoc through war, murder, and destruction. The terrorist organizations that will emerge in the next few decades, which are the result of US intelligence and war crimes, will spread around the world, as will various later terrorist organizations which will also emerge from the criminal, military, and intelligence activities of the United States of America and cause many deaths. The USA itself will also not be spared by this emerging terrorism, especially when, at the beginning of the new millennium, New York is hit by much suffering and destruction, and terror will claim thousands of human lives. But soon after, a new outrageously violent terrorist organization will emerge in the Arab world, which will carry on such a bloody business as never before under the guise of a religion. The emergence of this terrorism will also be blamed on America and will itself bring untold suffering to the whole world. The new terrorism will be so enormous that only the most serious military operations and battles will be able to partially overcome it, while other terrorist and criminal organizations cannot be countered even by large police, security, and military forces. But long before this worldwide spreading terror organization is created, which will be joined by tens of thousands of young and medieval, misguided, work-shy, adventurous and criminal beings, who will then spread torture, horrible deaths, rape and destruction. A dictatorship union will be founded in Europe, with headquarters in Belgium, which the European states will join. This dictatorship, which will be led by power-hungry rulers and which will aim to bring all European states under their thumb, as well as possibly also non-European countries, will rekindle the West's traditional enmity against Russia, together with America, will be viciously fueled by infamous machinations, possibly to provoke a military campaign. Then, in the new millennium, the time will come when millions of refugees from African, Asian, and Arab countries will flood the European states because an unpredictable ruler of the dictatorship union will call for flight behavior in Africa, Arabia, and Asia. Thus, some time after the turn of the millennium, tens of thousands of criminals, violent criminals, and terrorists will be smuggled into the states of the dictatorship union, which no one will be able to control comprehensively. From the 1980s onwards, there will also be widespread unemployment, worldwide inflation, and public debt, which will make all food and other commodities ever more expensive. Overall, the value of money will fall worldwide, which will be particularly true in Europe, with the introduction of European money. This will drive especially the member states of the dictatorial union emerging in Europe into horrendous debts, as mismanagement will also result in financial debts or even bankruptcies, which in many cases can only be prevented by state financial aid. All this cannot remain without consequences, for the peoples will rise up and possibly go on to revolution, which could be the point at which, according to an old prophecy, Russia will rise up against the governmental terror directed against it by the European Union and America and attack the West overnight, whereby Europe would then be free of its dictatorship if the dark prophecy were to be fulfilled in this way. This could also mean, as the same prophecy says, that Europe would then be pacified by Russia, which could also spread throughout the world.
Thanks. I can only vaguely recall this prediction. But now I would like to ask how many A4 pages of your father Svath's annals actually cover me, if you know that.
I really do not know, because the records are stored in an electronic form, but the amount is very considerable. In my opinion, if I had to convert everything to the size of A4 pages, which would be very labor-intensive and lengthy, the annals would add up to thousands of pages.
But you do not have to do that, please, because it was just a question. Then I would like to talk briefly about the pole shift, which Svath also mentioned, which is progressing more and more, and also contributes to the fact that the climate change caused by the criminal machinations of the overpopulation is even increasing. Because the pole shift to the south also brings changes. As you told me some time ago, the Earth's magnetism has long since shifted from the Greenland side, so the pole shift has long since moved eastwards to the south, so the magnetic pole point is now in Siberia. You also said that the latest data on how far the pole magnetism is moving south is no longer 50 kilometers, but currently nearly 72 kilometers per year. But since I have been asked a lot about the pole jump or the magnetic pole movement, I would appreciate it if you could explain something about this.
Although we have already talked about it several times during our whole contact time, I can, of course, explain some things again, especially because there have been big changes which you have already mentioned, concerning the change of direction of the wandering magnetic pole. On average on Earth, there is normally a magnetic pole shift or pole jump every 250,000 to 500,000 years. On the Earth planet, the last pole shift took place about 782,000 years ago, which means that the pole shift now taking place is very delayed. However, it is a fact that the now taking place pole migration leads to the fact, as I have already explained once before, that also the Earth magnetic field has lost about 12% of its strength since the beginning of the pole shift. The magnetic North Pole first shifted towards Alaska and Greenland, but from there it shifted in the 20th century alone by around 1,500 kilometers from Alaska towards Siberia. The speed of the migration to the pole increased over time from a few meters to kilometers, with the influence of Earth humans also contributing to this. On the one hand, through the large number of atomic bomb explosions, and on the other hand, through the exploitation of Earth humans' resources, through which the planetary balance has been and continues to be seriously disturbed. The exploitation of resources leads on the one hand to disturbances in the balance of the planet, but also to the fact that asteroid and meteorite impacts also lead to disturbances in the balance. Because the masses of resources taken from the Earth and exploited in a downright predatory manner can no longer perform their shock-absorbing function. But back to the wandering pole magnetism, which is currently moving in a zigzag pattern through the Siberian tundra, changing very rapidly in its strength and showing a current migration speed of about 72 kilometers per year.
Yes, these are the facts you have recently given me, but I think we should talk about this a little more. Also in the sense that the so-called pole jump and the magnetic fields of the Earth are reversed and are very popular with doomsday conspirators who go into the mad and confused claim that the Earth's magnetic field reversal means the end of the world and the destruction of the planet, which is of course absolute nonsense, because the Earth has already had thousands of pole jumps since it was founded. In fact, the polarity of the planet, or the Earth's magnetic field, has been reversed many times in the course of the Earth's history. As you have explained, and as our geologists have also been able to ascertain from their investigations of the Atlantic seabed and other research. According to the measurements they have carried out, they also say that in periods of 25,000 to 500,000 years on average, a pole jump has taken place, as well as that the last one took place about 800,000 years ago, so that the next one is more than overdue. Only the geologists are not sure, however, apparently yet, whether the next pole jump now runs off with delay or not. But you say that the pole magnetism migration is now effectively underway.
That is correct and without doubt, because the pole reversal has already begun several hundred years ago and is inexorably running.
If I may resort to my knowledge, the Earth's magnetic field is generated in the Earth's core, which consists mainly of molten iron, in the form of gigantic iron crystals that are constantly changing in motion. The Earth's magnetic field is caused by fast convection currents or equalizing currents as a result of temperatures of different temperatures. The convection current is also considered to be the motor for the tectonic movements of the Earth's plate. In principle, the liquid part of the Earth's core, but also the Earth's mantle, the Earth's crust, the oceans, and the influences from outer space play an important role. From there, the enormous heat also rises, which liquefies the interior of the Earth as magma, which rises to the border of the Earth's mantle and, in the case of volcanism, is ejected from the volcanoes as lava by powerful explosions, or, in the case of lava vents, simply swells out of the Earth in thin fluid form. So heat is generated inside the Earth, which also cools down and heats up again, etc. In addition to the entire crystal transforming and liquid process in the Earth's core, the core rotates and a current flows through these overlapping movements in the crystal glowing liquid Earth's core, which is why the whole thing can be described as a gigantic planetary dynamo. Through this in turn, through the Earth dynamo, which I would also like to call geodynamo, electricity is created and with it a flow of current, through which in turn an induction is created. That is to say, a generation of electrical currents and voltages, through which the magnetic field is created. The Earth's magnetic field, which also extends deep into the space of the world. This magnetic field also surrounds the Earth, which can also be depicted as a horizontal figure 8, in the center of which the Earth is arranged, and from whose north and south poles the Earth's magnetism radiates. This protects the planet, nature, its fauna and flora, and mankind from deadly solar radiation, just as this magnetic field helps the Earth and also animals of all kinds to find their way around. Unfortunately, according to your explanations, the earthly magnetic field is getting weaker and weaker, which is the conclusion of the pole reversal or magnetic field reversal, because the complete reversal of the Earth's magnetic field is in progress. Although such a pole jump could lead to the end of the accustomed lifestyle of mankind, but the whole thing would not cause the end of the world, as crazy conspiracy theorists and prophets of doom try to drive the believers into fear and terror with their feeble-minded assertions. Maybe you can also say something else, maybe how the migration of the poles is created.
As you have said, pole reversal began several hundred years ago, and a pole reversal occurs when enough large areas of the outer core of the planet are aligned opposite to their surroundings. However, such a process takes decades and millennia until the polarity has completely changed, which is noticeable by a weakening of the Earth's magnetic field, as is also the case with the Earth planet, where the strength of the magnetic field has decreased over the last 200 years or so. This is a typical and undeniable sign of the pole shift that occurs on Earth. Already in the next 500 to 1,000 years, the process of polar collapse, also in connection with climate change, can have partly dramatic effects on Earth, which can be severe under certain circumstances. For example, the magnetic field that deflects the solar winds to the poles. Shielding and protecting the Earth from radiation could be gradually weakened, exposing Earth humans and nature and its flora and fauna to increasingly strong solar radiation. And this could be the case, for example, if solar particles were to punch large holes in the ozone layer. This would also mean that the technical apparatus and equipment of Earth humans would cease to function, because the coronal mass ejections of the Sun would lead to irreparable disturbances in this respect. This would render all electrical and electronic achievements useless, such as electrical installations of all kinds, such as high-voltage networks, but also electronic apparatus and equipment such as computers and communication systems, etc. And this could be the case is proven by the fact that for a number of years now, solar storms or solar tempests have also been able to repeatedly affect the Earth's magnetic field and also satellites, including GPS and communication satellites. If the Earth's magnetic field becomes even weaker over time, it is also possible that the electricity distribution network may collapse, either partially or completely, as has happened irregularly in recent years, but in more distant times it may be interrupted again and again or even fail completely. This should be seen in such a way if effectively bad effects should occur. Possibly it could result, as it rarely happens with planets, when a pole jump occurs that 4 magnetic poles are formed. In any case, this could lead to problems in nature and its fauna and flora, because orientation disorders would occur as a result of multimagnetism, because in this respect the animal and wildlife world in particular is dependent on the Earth's magnetism, as is the world of insects, reptiles, amphibians, birds, and the aquatic life, etc., which navigate their paths according to the planetary magnetic field. It must be clearly stated, however, that the now effectively taking place pole migration and the weakening of the Earth's magnetic field, which is connected with it, will not lead to the extinction of Earth humans, but it can mean. And this also depends on the whole of humanity and its future general behavior and work. That the entire standard of living with all its technologies and achievements of all kinds can collapse, and that new beginnings for continued existence must be sought and created in every respect. The world will not end, however, but will continue to exist as before, just as life on the planet has always been, just as it has always been with all the thousands of poles falling. A pole jump can always be survived, at least most life forms will always survive, and also when certain areas become dangerous areas, mainly inland and in higher and mountainous areas.
As I said before, all the Doomsday Prophet's claims are pure nonsense. And it is also nonsense that the process turns the inner core of the Earth and thereby shifts the surface of the Earth, which is ultimately to destroy humanity. Now look here, I have written down these questions here so that I do not forget them. You have told me in confidence some things about the so-called crop circles, and also pointed out that about 88% are artistic works of Earthlings, but we have not spoken openly about this yet. Although you said that the earthly works or earthly crop circles are made by extraterrestrial forces, you also said that only from the end of the year 2016 this fact may be officially mentioned, so I will talk about it now. But it would be interesting to be allowed to say something about the remaining 12%, which have other origins than earthly work, whereby I only mention those percentages which can be traced back to terrestrial planetary sources, which are also connected to light phenomena, which appear in grain fields, etc.
Of course, we can speak openly about this if we do not also want to mention the other factors that we are not allowed to address.
That is the point of my question, because what you said before was never complete, because certain things had to be kept silent about, which is no longer necessary, as I understood your words at the time. And the rest, which still must not be addressed, we do not need to discuss that.
Of course, that is correct. A certain percentage of crop circle appearances is, as you know, not the product of Earth humans being, although I cannot give the exact percentage for directive reasons. What I openly address in relation to crop circles, as well as other symbolic formations in other natural straw plants, that is to say in various grain fields, as well as in grass, bamboo, rape, and reed, that is to say sweetgrass, does not refer to works of Earth humans. These are in fact based all over the Earth on purely Earth magnetic phenomena, which, however, are related to early Earth humans' energy force practices, the effective nature of which must be concealed. This is because if today the old practices in this respect, which have fallen into oblivion, were to become known again then due to the unreasonableness and greed for war of Earth humans, their use for the production of a very dangerous military weapon would be unavoidable. This would have extremely far-reaching and serious consequences, which I could not be responsible for if I acted against our directives. It would also not be in our Plejaran sense as a whole. On the other hand, as far as the extraterrestrial influences during the creation of the crop circles are concerned, I can only explain again the same thing, in other words, as I have already explained to you earlier. Namely, that the extraterrestrial forces which are created during the creation of crop circles by Earth humans correspond to normal, natural, universal impulse vibrations. These influence everything and anything, including all genera and species of human beings, including Earth humans beings, as well as all matter and all fauna and flora. These energetic impulse oscillations correspond to cosmic natural forces, which create all works of art of nature, and also create perfect symmetrical forms of various kinds, which arise everywhere and also in the open nature in everything that exists. All imaginable circle forms, squares, octahedrons, hexahedrons, cubes, crosses, etc. are created, which appear in many materials such as plants, crystals, ores, and especially snowflakes. When it snows, enormous masses of snow crystals fall from the sky as frozen works of art. Billions of them, whereby no two snow crystals are the same, because each one is a unique piece of nature or the extraterrestrial cosmic universal artistic vibration. All living beings are also affected by the whole, which means that